Hank and I are going to talk on something that, for the most part, I would say it impacts at least. I don't know, Hank. What do you think? At least like 98% of the United States.
Well, I think to some degree it will impact all of us in some manner.
Hmm.
Some won't worry about it because they've got a glide path that will ensure that they live a very good retirement life. And I learned a long time ago, retirement is not an age thing, it's a money thing. Okay. I'm
All
just
right.
saying that if you've got a funnel, an income funnel that will pay you for the rest of your life, then you may call yourself retired, or you may call yourself self-employed. You may call you can call yourself anything you want to, because you don't have to worry about where your next meal is coming from.
Okay. Good.
Now, I think you will agree that that's probably the top maybe 10% of the people in America.
Right. But the bottom 90%.
Oh, hallelujah. Well, for the bottom 90%, I think many people, many people had maybe a procrastination mentality, meaning, "Ah, I'll take care of that next year.
Okay.
I'll start that when I'm 30."
So
Uh,
let's set the stage real quick for everyone who's listening. Right. So our discussion topic today is it is retirement, but we're going to take a different perspective and a different twist to it. We want to make sure that it's relatable to everyone, regardless of whether you are 25 years old, or what 65 or 75 years old. It's a different twist. All right.
mhm,
So we want you
mhm.
guys to listen closely. We're going to go over some statistics. We did not make these stats up. If you don't like the statistics, I would suggest that you talk to Social Security Administration or other economists, because we're just going to give you guys the facts. All right.
Right. Mhm.
And this is to ensure, because I think it's almost like, at some point, in order to help someone, you have to be blatantly honest. Would you
And some
agree,
people
Hank?
don't like that. Some
Some
people don't like that.
some people don't like that, but
Right.
I mean, you have to be blatantly honest, because
Mhm.
if if we kind of massage the issue, right,
Mhm.
what happens?
Then we are being um we're being untruthful or unrealistic, or we're not being. I think we should be transparent in our approach to this, because this conversation, there's nothing for us to gain by saying,
The truth.
wherever you are and whoever you are, we're going to throw some information at you, and if it doesn't apply to you, God bless you. If it does apply to you, God bless you. But the point is, it will touch everybody. The point is, what are you going to do about it based on where you see yourself today? Okay,
Yeah.
and I'm probably older than a lot of people that are on, and I see there's some individuals who are putting up some information, but I'll be honest. When I was Leland your age, I wasn't focused on retirement. The only retirement I was focused on was I was going to have a military retirement, and there would probably be Social Security. And in my mindset was that should be enough, even though I knew I would join corporate America at some point.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay,
Right.
but I I joined corporate America and realized that that wasn't it. Okay, my my dream of being a corporate exec became a nightmare because of the corporate culture. So I stepped away and started to do my own thing. And that's me. Okay. But I think some of us are waiting for something in a bad situation to change. It's like being in a bad relationship.
Whew.
You're praying that it will change. And and I say that because I read a book probably about 15, 20 years ago. And it's a very interesting book. I don't remember the author, but I remember the book. And the title of the book is Leadership and Self Deception.
Wow.
Now, I would pray to God. My wife and I were going through some stuff, and I was praying to God to change her, change her habits, change her idiosyncrasies. Okay.
Ain't gonna happen,
I
Hank.
I read this. I read the book, and I realized that hey, I've been looking at this situation wrong, just like people look at retirements wrong. I was looking at this book. I'm looking at the situation wrong, and realized that I don't need to pray to God to change my wife. I pray to God to change me, make me a better person, make me a better husband, a better father, what have you. Now, that's to me, that's self awareness. Okay, because I couldn't blame anybody for my attitude, my disposition, um, but myself. And I noticed that someone says that change is difficult. Well, I think to me it's a mindset. If you think it's difficult, it's difficult. If you think it's easy. But whose mindset? It's your mindset. I can't tell you because I don't walk in your shoes. Okay.
Mm.
So I say that to say, um, getting back to corporate America, I planned. My wife and I were investing. We had a financial planner that was helping us. And again, we started late, and the guy says, "Well, if you want to get here in life, wherever there is, you would have to invest 1,500 to $2,000 every month religiously to get there." Well, Leland, I don't know too many people today that can set aside $1,000 to $2,000 a month, aside from everything that's going on,
Right.
towards future retirement or future income plans. And I said that because I like using the example of you. Okay, you're making six figures, you're making $100,000, and
Hmm.
to a lot of people that's a lot of money. But if we look at the tax structure, now that's gross. You
Correct.
look at the tax structure, and I'm going to be generous. I'm going to throw out a number. I'm not accurate with it, but I'm going to say at least 40% of that you don't receive because of taxes. So you're taking home 60 grand.
60 grand.
Okay, I'm telling you,
over
okay,
over 12 months.
right,
Let's make
over
sure
60 grand. So that's 5 grand a month. Okay.
there you go. Yep.
And if you got a house, if you got a mortgage payment or you're paying rent, and say it's $1,500 a month every month, so you now it's down to 3,500.
Yep.
You got a car note, you might have two car notes, and say between the two notes it's 750.
Jesus. Yeah. Yeah.
You got phone, you got internet, you got phone,
I hope you ain't
you
got no
got
kids.
you got living expenses, you've got all these things, and then all of a sudden you turn around and you realize the fact that you're underwater at least $500 a month. You have not tithed, nor have you put anything away for retirement or savings. So most people look at that situation and said, "There's no way I can do it," so they settle for it. They become comfortable in their discomfort. Okay. Now hear what I said. They become comfortable in their discomfort. They throw up their hands and say, "Woe is me." So now they work in this dead end job for another 25 years, hating every minute of it. And at the end of it, they got nothing. So they think they are relying on social insecurity because they didn't participate in the company's 401 plan. They didn't do any investing on their own, and now they're trying to figure out what am I going to do.
But Hank, what about the people that still participate in those plans? And the thing that's interesting is they participate, and most participate up to the point of where they can receive some type of match, right?
Mm-hmm.
Statistically, it shows that the employee is willing to invest up to about 6% of their income in exchange for their employer
Mm-hmm.
giving 3%. Well, that's 9%. So let's just be, and matter of fact, let's pretend that it's 10% total, right?
But I think it's going to be 10% of take home, not 10% of gross.
Correct. But even in a perfect world, let's pretend that it's gross.
Okay.
For easy mathematics for everyone else, all right?
Mm-hmm.
If you work for an employer, and let's pretend once again that it's 10% of your gross income, which we know it's not, okay?
Mm-hmm.
If you work 40 years, perfectly for 40 years,
Mm-hmm.
nothing has changed in your situation. No one has gotten injured. Everyone is still alive and healthy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, children don't need special needs for education. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
they go to the best public schools, so you don't have to worry about those expenses. All right,
Mm-hmm.
and let's say you're earning six figures, $100,000. 10% of $100,000 for everyone is what? It's 10 grand a year. And let's just say that you worked there perfectly for 40 years. They didn't force you out in retirement early to replace you with some new algorithm or some machine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
At best, you're looking at 400 grand. That's in a perfect scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm wrong. Here's where I'm wrong. For retirement, and I want to show this to you as we're talking about it,
Oh,
so people
the
can
the,
also
the, the
also look it
typical
up.
retirement account.
Well, not just that, but just for in this example, we're talking about contributions, right?
Okay.
So there are called contribution limits on how much you can even put into those accounts. All right, so
Mm-hmm.
that's probably where we should start off with, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so in this example, we'll look up either the 401k or the IRA, something like that.
Okay. Let's see.
And all right, I have it up right here, and
You have it? Okay.
yeah, and
Okay.
this is coming from the IRS. So anyone who wants to check it, feel free. And if you're upset with it, please talk to the IRS. You know, these are their rules. So if someone has an individual retirement account, this is the IRS website. All right. So we look at the contribution limits. How much it says right here? How much can I contribute? I'm going to be taxed off. I'm going to be capped if I'm under 50 years old at
Mm-hmm.
$6,000 per year.
But suppose I had two IRAs.
Your contribution is still capped at $6,000 a year
Per IRA or just total?
per the year.
Oh
for
man.
for the year. So just as an example, and let's say you're under 50,
Mm-hmm.
$6,000. The average person right now is working less than 20 years at one employer.
Mm-hmm.
But let's pretend that it's a perfect work history and someone's able to get a full 40 years in.
Okay.
Right? That would be $240,000. That's
Mm-hmm.
40 years straight. Okay. And by the time they hit the 50-year mark, 50 years old, they'll be able to invest like an additional 1,000. All right.
Mm-hmm.
The average cost of living in the United States right now is $69,000 as of 2021. That means every single year,
69,000. Okay.
69,000. So if I were
Okay.
just to so this is making the assumption that we're not talking about inflation, that the cost of living is not going up in 2022 or
Mm-hmm.
2023 and so forth, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to divide that.
I've done it.
What do you have, sir?
I have 3.478 years.
And let's pretend in a perfect world that could be 3.5 years,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay. So, one, if you're earning six figures, then your expenditures are probably what? Not 69,000. Can we agree to that?
Um, I would ask each individual that's listening, if you were to whatever your total gross income is, just deduct 40% that you're not taking home, and you know how you're living on what you're not bringing home. And if you don't have 6,000 a year or at least to put towards an IRA or some type of investment portfolio,
Yeah.
then you already know what you're going to be looking at age 65 or 70 or 75. And I think life expectancy now might be over 80. So
Correct.
my
Yeah.
point to you is, how do you want to live from age 60 to 65 to age 80? If you, bad English, if you ain't got nothing set aside now, or very little. Really, because that those are the cold hard facts. And I've noticed that people have been talking about mindset and difficulty. No one said it was going to be easy to change. But if you don't change directions, you're going to end up where you're headed. Okay. Um, Leland, because I'm passionate only because people complain about the system not being fair, or they're being taken advantage of, or this, that, or the other. And the only thing I can say is, fine. You can complain all you want to, but if you're not willing to step out and do something about it, you'll be complaining next year. And by next year, it'll be worse than it is right now. Okay? Let me, I had something, because it was talking about the numbers of people, Americans, who retire without a savings. It says, I think it says that 25% of adults in America have less than $5,000 saved for retirement. Okay? It says that 15% have no retirement savings at all. And the same survey reported that on average, people think there is a 45% chance they will outlive their savings. Now, that's assuming a good day. But heavens forbid, if you've got some health issues now, okay? A few years ago, you could not get insurance if you had a pre-existing condition. Now you may be able to get some insurance because you have a pre-existing condition.
It's
But
gonna be expensive.
it's going to be expensive, but it's not. And here's the beauty: you know, and I know that there are solutions. But oftentimes there are so many solutions that people are constantly trying to figure out which is the better offer.
Yeah.
On the front end, I don't know whether we were recording. You and I were just sitting here talking about vehicles, about cars.
Yeah.
And probably about 15 years ago, I was doing some talking with a young man who was about 25 years old. And I said to him, we're sitting at a table, and I said, I want you to imagine that I have put a set of keys of every car you can think of on the table. And I want you to choose a set of keys. And he sat there and he goes, man, that's difficult. I said, what's difficult about it? And he said, there's too many choices. I said, I would imagine that you have thought about what it would be like to own maybe a Maserati or a Ferrari or Porsche, what have you. And he said, yeah. He said, but I don't know. My point is that I think here in America, sometimes we have too many things to choose from. So because we've got so many to choose from, we don't choose. We want someone else to choose for us. And I'll tell you this now. If you don't choose,
Oh,
you
the
have
choice has been
chosen.
made. The
Yeah,
choice has been made.
you've chosen. Um, here's the deal. A lot of people are waiting on social insecurity. Okay. And I think I read someplace that the average amount of money that, now again, depending on what you have put in,
Yeah,
the
it's
average
always.
amount of Social Security that people get is about $1,500 a month.
That's right. I think it's like
Now,
1535.
if you are currently, if you're living now and it's costing you 5,000 a month, and you're going to only get 15, how do you bridge that $3,500 gap? You know what most people do, Leland, when they haven't prepared properly?
Work at Walmart as a greeter.
They sell stuff. They downsize. They sell stuff. They move in with their kids.
That's right.
They
Like,
if
but Hank, the lie
Mhm.
that they tell the public is, you know what? I think it's time that we downsize. This is just way too big of a house for us to be in. That's what they say. I
Well,
have heard people say that to me. I'm like, downsize? Did the
do you
size of
remember
your room change?
you remember the conversation you and I had last year
Yeah.
when I was buying the, what did I say? Most people my age are doing what?
Downsizing. Not only are they what do they downsize, Hank? They end
Uh-huh.
up shipping over to being a ward.
That's right. And what did I tell you my wife and I did?
The opposite.
And you've been here. It's not a luxurious mansion or what have you. It's something that's nice. It's something that we could afford without stretching. I don't I don't worry about the mortgage or something breaking down or this or that or the other. I don't worry about that. And I realize the fact that I might be unique, but I think I'm unique because I started to prepare early. And I think one of the challenges that and people gonna say, man, these conversations, these guys are going crazy. No, it comes back to if
It's
you don't
connected.
budget, if you don't create a budget, if you don't plan and work your plan, again, you're going to end up where you're headed. Now, do I like going out to a good restaurant and having some Chateaubriand or some filet mignon or lobster tails? Sure. Can I afford to do that? Sure. But I also can afford not to. I
Whew.
used to drive a luxury foreign car. I thought I owned it. In actuality, it owned me.
It owned you.
Okay? So I said, hey, you know what? All I need is reliable transportation. And people said, man, you used to drive a Jaguar. What are you doing driving a Chevrolet? And I go, only because I choose to. And when I had a change of mind and said I just needed to look good, smell good,
Feel
drive
good.
good, get me from point A to point B. In absolutes, once you get inside the car, think about it, people. Once you get inside the car and you take out all the decals, inside and out, how do you know one from the other? I'm just saying, how do you know one from the other if you take off all the emblems and all those identifying marks?
Yeah, I
So,
mean, yeah, it becomes irrelevant.
because we've been led to believe as part of the marketing strategy that there needs to be a pecking order, a hierarchy of affluency.
Yeah. And honestly,
Mm-hmm.
people, they're so okay. If we all are aware that your contributions to your IRA is limited at $6,000 per year, and
Mm-hmm.
then we're also aware that the let's look this up. I mean, because I believe people are working for less than 20 years now for an employer. So if people are averaging out at 20 years or less for a single employer,
Whew, how do you fill up the gap for the next
yeah,
20 years?
there's an obvious gap there that as a society we're missing. We're missing something.
Mm-hmm.
We're missing
Mm-hmm.
something important right here. And we know that people can't physically do the same thing day in and day out. We know that. So there needs to be a, a quick change. Needs to be a quick change. And Hank, I wanted you to also give your statistic. This is coming obviously right here we're showing in Investopedia, but the data here is actually coming from one of the larger financial institutions, and
Mm-hmm.
it's touching on the amount of money that is in said retirement account
Oh
for
yeah,
the
I remember
most
we talked
part.
about that last week. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for the most part, people are by the time they're 50 or 59, they're looking in the best case scenario in an
Mm-hmm.
economy where they haven't lost everything, right? They're looking at
Mm-hmm.
at having a balance of about $160,000.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be
Mm-hmm.
about 3 years worth of quote unquote retirement. So after they're done with those 3 years of quote unquote retirement, they have to
Mm-hmm.
go back to the workforce.
Well, they got to go back to something. And if I may interject, um, I think much of the data that I've looked at concerning retirement says that if you want to have $1 million in retirement savings, this is what you need to do. Or if you want to be considered successful, you need to earn $100,000 a year. Well, um, I know that if you're going to live in retirement the way you live pre-retirement, it'll take more than a million. And if you want to live a reasonable, carefree life, it's going to take more than 100 grand. And I'm trying to find a document that talked about the classes of middle class, because middle class is a misnomer. For most people, you're considered middle class if it's just you over 50 grand a year.
Mm-hmm.
Now you know and I know that 50 grand ain't nothing. Bad English ain't nothing.
I thought you were going to say diddly squat.
Well, same difference. So the thing is, and the other day we talked about how the federal government is in cahoots with corporate America, and part of that had to do with we call it minimum wage. But every job in America, every job, if you go to the Department of Labor statistics, it gives a salary range for every job from beginner to seasoned. And when I left corporate America, I knew I knew my background, I knew my skill set, and the first employer I went to, had something called a group interview process. There were 15 of us in the room, and they get an opportunity to see 15 people that are potential employees at a time, 15 at a
Mm-hmm.
time.
Competition.
They interviewed 105 people, They narrowed it down to 15. They narrowed it down to 5. They narrowed it down to 3, and then they selected 1. Then they said, Hank, we have a practice to never pay an employee more than we pay a partner, and we don't pay any partner 100 grand. Now, it doesn't matter what I was hoping for. If I wanted to work for that law firm, I had to change my mindset and agree to something less than 100 grand because they were not paying themselves 100 grand.
Oh,
So
oh,
what I had to do was I had to settle for.
oh.
Okay. If I wanted to work there, I needed to settle for it. But Leland, now this was a small company business. And what I didn't understand at the time or didn't know at the time, that every 2 to 3 months, they gave themselves something called a draw, DRAW. And at the end of the year, they were paying themselves in excess of $750,000.
But it
Okay.
wasn't salary though, correct?
No, and oh no, because salaries, income is different, So and maybe next time we will talk about income versus salary versus other types of
Passive
of what
income,
have
yeah.
you. Okay.
Yep.
But the point I'm making is I settled for, and most of us settle for, and we settle for because, as I said at the beginning, there's a salary range,
Yeah.
okay, and you get that, and then a year later, or 6 months later, or 5 years later, you might get something else, or you might even get promoted, but they have a cap on promotion, okay. So I was older. My boss was much younger than I. So if I meant to climb that ladder of success, one or two things had to happen. Either he had to move up or out,
Yep. Yep. Or
or
out.
I had to knock him off that next rung of the ladder, which was highly unlikely. So I'm saying that's where we all are, but we don't think about it. We just walk in, we fill out a resume, we get accepted, we are happy. Okay.
Right.
A year later, we get a dollar raise. We are ecstatic, man. I got a dollar.
And I want to take this step further. Anyone who has a job has a salary. We're not saying that you shouldn't or that
No,
you
no.
should
Oh,
quit or
no.
nothing like
Heavens,
that.
no. Heavens,
I,
no.
my advice would be, if you are someone that does have consistent earned income from a job, from a salary, or I guess even in this day and age from a quote unquote side hustle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then what you should do in this case is, what's something small that you can start with that
Mm-hmm.
that will build to bigger momentum, because you don't have to always do $1 million investment or even $100,000 investment. You can
Mm-hmm.
always start small, and there are multiple ways of starting small when it comes to investing, especially when it comes to alternative investing. Too
Wait a
many
minute. Wait a minute. You said all who investment?
alternative, because a lot of people just think that the stock market is the end all be all.
Well, Leland, can I ask you? Can you give me some examples of alternative investing, so that, because I'm not familiar. I'm not familiar with that term.
Let me help those who are wondering the same thing. In your example, where um, you were told that the partners themselves do not pay themselves a salary over $100,000, right?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a small business,
Uh huh.
right?
Right.
Well, in that small business is structured to where people happen to own that small business.
Mm-hmm.
And based on the performance of that small business, they are then able to have draws or take out income or profit from that business,
Profit
either
sharing. Mm-hmm.
profit sharing, absolutely,
Mm-hmm.
whether that's annually or quarterly. Just depends on how it's structured, right?
Right.
So that is an example of an alternative investment because a person or an employee. So you could be an employee of Coca-Cola and yet own equity in your local yoga studio. You
Ah.
would just have to be
Ah.
equipped and educated enough to know exactly how to approach that opportunity.
Okay. Okay. I see. I see. Alternate or alternative is something other than your primary source of income.
Alternative would be anything outside of the stock market that is legal. So we're not telling you
Ah.
guys
Okay.
to do anything illegal, of course, right? But
So
we're
a
telling you
part-time job doesn't qualify.
a part-time job does not qualify, but that does qualify as additional income. But
Which
that's earned income. That's earned income as far as someone having to work for it. You want to
which
get
increases my tax obligation.
increase your tax obligation. You want more passive income, which is taxed significantly less.
Oh.
And I think a great example of that is anyone who's ever read an article about Jeff Bezos. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Um, hey, Jeff Bezos, his salary is $80,000 a year.
And Buffett, I think, is 100,000.
Yeah. So just let that sink in. All right. That's the salary of that they have. So if that's the salary, and you're looking at the net worth, or you're looking at the earnings on Forbes, where did
Oh.
the rest of it come from? Correct.
Oh, please.
That's what I mean. And what's so funny is the answer is literally in front of us every day.
Well, Leland, do you think because of that wrinkle in the law, the language of the law, that the current administration is looking at changing changing terminology from income to capital gains to estates or something. You think that might be part of it? And we might be over the heads of some folk, but I think it's important that they understand how the system is gamed to our disadvantage, to the working person's disadvantage.
What's interesting about that, and I see that we have a comment. Someone mentioned their dividends. What's interesting when we're talking about these particular things you brought up, Hank,
Mm-hmm.
is that capital gains, as an example,
Mm-hmm.
that's something that they purposely want to tax, excuse my French, the hell out of.
Mm-hmm.
They want to tax the hell out of capital gains. But you know who gets their capital gains most frequently? It's not necessarily real estate agents do get a lot of capital quote. Well, they get a lot of commissions,
Mm-hmm.
but a lot of capital gains happens to come from people who are trading in the stock market. Now imagine, yeah, absolutely. And so imagine this. Imagine this. The average person, when they think of investing, they think of the stock market. And then,
Mm-hmm.
when the average person hears alternative investing, unfortunately, that average person thinks of Bitcoin. Okay, both are methods that people use for capital gains, and what they have begun to say for those things is that people are not necessarily investing; they're speculating. So they're essentially just hopping in and hopping out based on how well they think something would perform that
Mm-hmm.
day or that segment of time. Investing would infer or believe or give the understanding that someone is looking to hold for future benefit
Okay.
that
Appreciated
will
value.
that will increase in value and that will have some kind of tax advantage. If there's no tax advantage, it's not in fact what I would consider to be a true investment.
Now, I read something probably about month and a half ago, that the U.S. Treasury Department is looking at the idea of Bitcoin investing. They're wanting banks or the Bitcoin developer, owner, what have you, to provide certain information so that Bitcoin transactions can be taxed. And they want to monitor to make certain that money laundering is not happening to any significant degree. But I think I saw Bitcoin had gotten to over $60,000 last week.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
and again, we talk about speculation, okay? And I think we're talking with people who may be interested in investing in Bitcoin, but I also believe that most of the people that we're talking about, as someone said, how do we get off this current merry-go-round of life? How do we what can if we start from zero or below zero, is there a path of recovery? And I believe that there is, because we've read or heard of so many times where people have lost it all for whatever reason, and a few years later they were on the road of recovery, and a few years later they were back seemingly on top of the world. Now, I think that many of us, we don't have a lot of time to do things, and we may not have a lot of money to do things. For instance, I think it was a few months ago that I looked at buying some shares of Google or um, um, I forget some of the others. And at the time, one share was over 2 grand. Now, a lot of these companies do not pay dividends on a regular basis. They, I'm just saying, they just want you to let it ride.
Let it ride. That's right.
Okay. And then, so you let it ride. You may have some shares in Google or what have you. So now it's retirement age, and you are now eligible. If you do withdrawals before a certain age, there's a penalty and heavy taxes on your money.
Yeah.
But then if you wait, I think it's 57 and a half, that you can start to withdraw without a major penalty, but you're going to be taxed on whatever those gains are at
yeah.
at a higher rate. It'll be that plus whatever income. So again, it's considered regular income.
And you're right. So it's 59 and a half there. But here's the thing that I want people to be cautious of.
Mm-hmm.
If all right, let's use the metaphor of a cow. And this should really make perfect sense. We've used this before in our discussions with one of the IRA companies that we're partnered with, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's use this analogy, and I believe this analogy that really helps people understand this when it comes to investing. Imagine that you are a farmer, all right? You're someone who works hard
Okay.
with your hands, and you have various crops, and you also have livestock. And let's say part of the livestock are cattle, all right? And so you
Mm-hmm.
have this quote unquote golden calf. This calf is making you money, all right? You're loving it. So you know that everyone's like, man, Hank, the calf that you have is beautiful and it's worth some good money. We love that calf. And you're like, thank you, I appreciate it. Like, yeah, that calf right there is worth $5,000.
Mm-hmm.
The calf cannot make you money when you kill or sell the calf.
You can't eat it.
You can't eat it. That's a
Yeah.
one-time event. And here's the
Mm-hmm.
metaphor I'm getting. When you sell the Bitcoin. When you sell the shares of Google,
Ah.
that's a one time event.
Mm-hmm.
That may only pay your bills one time, or you may have to basically hold on to that amount in hopes to
Mm-hmm.
pay things later. But that's a one time event.
Okay.
It's not something that would give consistently. So going back to the calf or cow, well, you could have a cow that's a milk cow, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that milk cow has udders, whatever how you pronounce it, sorry. And you may
Yeah.
milk that cow every so often to enough to where it gives you gallons of milk, and then you sell it to a local store, and that
Mm-hmm.
milk or that dairy cow is producing consistent income. But once
Okay.
you sell that dairy cow,
Whop.
that consistent income is gone. You may get a
Okay.
lump sum payment, but that consistent income is gone. So if something is not being able to give you income, not value on a sheet of paper or on a phone,
Mm-hmm.
it has if it's going to give you income, I consider that an asset. But
Okay.
something that you would sell as a one time, I consider
Mm-hmm.
that value. But I'm
Mm-hmm.
not. I can't consider that an asset because it's not replenishing anything.
Um, the other day we were talking. And I'm not promoting Robert Kiyosaki. I'm promoting the concept that he brought to the table. And he says, if you have a job, that's one thing. You are a ward of whatever that system is. If you are a small business person, the job owns you. And that if you want to truly get ahead in life, because both of those are taxed heavily, that if you want to really get ahead in life, that you needed to move over into another quadrant. Um I forget offhand which quadrant it is. It's not the self-employed, it's the business owner quadrant. and
Oh,
and i
the B
and
quadrant,
I'm sorry.
the B quadrant, right?
Yes, I'm reflecting on that only in the sense that I was doing some research about which is better for the average person, um, the stock market or owning real estate. And I was looking at the two of those because 2 weeks ago I read an article that said 10% of the people own 89% of shares of stock. And then if you were to look at who that 10% is, for the most part, those are mega wealthy people who own um, millions and millions of dollars worth of shares. Now, and they may own thousands and thousands of Bitcoin or Dogecoin or cryptos. Okay. And I'm sitting back and I'm scratching my head that there's no way. So now you've got 90% of the people chasing 11% of the stock market.
Absolutely.
And unfortunately, that's not going to change. If anything, eventually it might be 15% of the, I mean, 10% of the people uh, owning 92% of the stock market.
Absolutely.
Okay. So if we're using, and that stock that we're talking about, that stock market we're talking about, incorporates your 401k, your mutual funds, whatever your investment accounts are, that's in that 11%.
Correct. Yeah.
And if you are investing in that pool, you know the results that you have gotten thus far. And if you are pleased with your perceived return on investment and you've run the numbers to realize that I'm going to be okay, if everything else being equal, that you're going to be okay, good on you. But if you say to yourself, well, listen, I don't want to, I need to make some changes, then I would encourage you to do your homework, but make some changes because we have to start taking calculated risk versus just risk.
Hank, someone has a question for you real quick. They want to know, the question is, why do you think that is? I'm believing that you're talking about why is it that the wealthiest 10% of Americans own 89% of the U.S. stock market? So I'm gonna let you answer first, and then I'll go after you.
Part of it is they are able to participate to my degree, to my belief, they're able to participate in something called pre IPO.
Yep.
And let me give you an example. Leland and I are working on a project. Hypothetically, we're working on a project, and it's going to be a gadget. And we are running short of money. So we find some friends who are willing to invest in our project because they believe in it. And we say that for every $100,000, they get 100,000 shares, or I might sell them for 10 cents a share. Okay.
Right.
So if you do the math, then you would own millions of shares. You'd own 1 million shares for $100,000 investment. Okay. It was 10 cents a share. Some people will buy more than that. But here's the deal. It goes public. That company goes public, and you've got, say, 5 million shares, and it goes public, and the shares are selling for $50 a share. What is now? What is your value? So these guys are able to play in that sandbox all the time.
And I want to piggyback on that and give a little more detail.
Okay.
So that it will, hoping that it drives it a little bit home. So part of what Hank mentioned is what's called a multiplier effect, right? And so you guys may have heard me say that before. This right here is an example of just Snapchat. And so first off, in basic business school or in basic accounting, we're all told equity is between the minus the liability. That gives you equity, right? So if you think about real estate, just really quick, you have the value of the property, and then you have the debt that is on the property. So that difference is the equity, right? The positive value. So same equation for business. However, with the stock market, what they do is based on the industry that individual business is in, they take that $1 of EBITDA, which is the earnings before interest, taxes, and depreciation. So all those expenses that I just mentioned in the acronym EBITDA, they don't include that in the calculation. So they take that $1, and if it's in the technology field, like Snapchat, they multiply that $1 of EBITDA, which is not profit, it's just earnings, okay? Take that $1 and they multiply it by 27 or $37. What does that mean? That means that a stock price could be $37 and the company could have never made a profit in its entire existence. A great example of that is Uber. Another great example of that is a local company here called Angie's List. Okay, the companies that I just mentioned have never made a profit. And if you want to check this out, you can. The great thing with publicly traded companies is that you have the ability to actually Google their financial statements. They report them to the SEC once a quarter. They're normally a quarter behind them, but you can actually look at the financial statements. Another example: Amazon did not make a profit until 2013. Okay, let it sink in. And here's a better example. Facebook. The time that Mark Zuckerberg was in college, when he had his colleagues, friends, and volunteers, and quote unquote employees of Facebook working, Facebook was not earning money. Facebook did not begin to earn money until they began to accept advertisements. So all those years as Facebook, as an internet company, they didn't have a clear picture of earning revenue, because remember, they weren't taking subscriptions. They weren't having their user base pay to use it. So they weren't. So how else were they making money? They didn't actually begin to make money until they added advertisements from local businesses onto their platform. And that's how they're making money now. But that was less than 10 years ago. That was probably 8 years ago.
And
so
now?
Now, right? So what happens is this. When Snapchat or someone like Snapchat wants to go public, they file with the SEC. A local bank underwriter that's in investment banking, such as Morgan Stanley, such as Goldman Sachs, such as Deutsche Bank, such as Credit Suisse, Barclays, etc. They reach out to that applicant of the SEC, because it's public. We can all go to the SEC website right now, and you can actually see when these companies have filed in their financials, right? So these underwriters of these banks reach out to these guys and say, listen, we can underwrite your company. So they go through their financials or the business plan, and they give a value what they believe it's worth. And then what they say is, listen, we are pretty confident in your company, and therefore we want to go ahead and also invest. In this example, Morgan Stanley invested almost 60.5 million shares into Snapchat before it went public. So it's meant that they were able to buy Snapchat for the true dollar per dollar valuation. Once Snapchat goes public on the market, every $1 of EBITDA is now $37. So it multiplied just by it going public. That's why for many corporate tycoons, the goal is to always take the company public, because that's the big payoff. Now let this sink in as well. If you look at many public companies, you'll notice that the founder and or CEO does not own 80% of the company, right? Why is that? Because before they went public, they gave a lot of their equity, a lot of their shares to these banks. That's why there was such an uproar a couple months ago about some certain companies doing a direct listing to go public instead of going through the initial underwriters. Okay. So in order for them to even get really, really good valuations, they're having to divvy up or let go or offer up parts of their equity for their company.
Leland, someone asked, is this artificial appreciation? And because someone is paying for it, their hard-earned money, it's not artificial.
That's kind of, right? So if we can all be honest, money is artificial, and money it only has a value because of a large group of us give it a belief to tie it to.
Well,
so yes. So by technicality, could it be artificial? Yes, they're artificial gains. The gains are coming from a multiplier in which various banks partnered together and gave a valuation. Keep in mind, their valuations come from equations, right? Have you ever seen Goldman Sachs give you their equation of how they value Facebook? Hell
Nope.
no. And you won't. That was something
But
that 5 guys made up behind closed doors of how they're going to calculate what the value of Facebook is, and so forth. So is it fictitious in that regard? Absolutely.
on the front end.
On the front end.
But once
Absolutely.
it goes public and someone pays that $37 a share,
They evaluate it.
the person who bought it for 10 cents a share, and it's now $37 a share, and they cash in, that is real. And I don't know whether then it's because my point was, for those individuals who invested heavily on the front end, be they companies or individuals, do they book that transaction as capital gains, which is now taxed differently, or may not be taxed at all based on the vehicle? Going back to the vehicle that was used to buy the shares on the front end.
So okay, and let's dive into that. For the banks themselves, so for example, Morgan Stanley didn't pay $37 per share for Snapchat. All right, let's be honest here. They paid probably 60 cents, maybe 50 cents per share. Okay, maybe $1. We can pretend that it was $1. I doubt it, but they paid it penny. We'll put it this way: they paid pennies on $1. All right. And once, to go back to also add to what Hank says, once someone in the general public, such as common lay people like ourselves, purchase a share of that company, we evaluated or agreed that should be the value in the market. That's why when a company goes public, but a large amount of the investor quote unquote community, aka the common people who invest in the stock market,
the common stock,
when they don't buy and the stock tanks within the first 6 hours or so, or the first 3 hours, whatever, what they're saying is that the market, aka the average person, didn't agree that company was valued at that. Put it on the flip side. The only reason that GameStop's value shot up was because a group of people, aka a smaller market of individuals, came together on a social media platform and said, hey, we're all going to buy into GameStop the moment it comes out, and we're going to purposely purchase high to inflate the price. We're going to basically disagree with the valuation of Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Barclays Capital, etc. Right? It's the same thing. It was opposite. But when the common lay people did that, the banks were upset because the banks lost money. Because the banks, one, had the opportunity to underwrite, and they purposely valued it low. And here's the other thing too that people don't really understand. And this is what I was trying to get at earlier. When I mentioned that the CEO or the founder typically doesn't own 80% of that company, they've given a lot of shares to these banks. Guys, like really think about this. If you know, or if you believe that shares on the stock market are small pieces of equity or ownership of a company, and if they're constantly trading or changing or being sold and purchased every single day, wouldn't it mean that at some point the original founders' equity stake would eventually begin to lessen? Let that sink in, right? If you have 52 cards in a deck and you chose to sell or lose or throw away 10 cards, you're going to have less than 52 cards, correct? That's basic mathematics, guys. The reason that doesn't happen is because what people don't know that they're doing is that when you're buying these shares that are quickly available, think about that, they're quickly available in the market, it's because you're buying the shares from Goldman Sachs, from Morgan Stanley, from JP Morgan. And that's what I was going to say, Hank, when you mentioned about whether they're taxed.
That makes sense.
The banks aren't taxed because the banks never take it out of the market. Whenever you sell and buy stock and you make a gain, you're not taxed unless you take the gains out of the market. The banks
Ah,
purposely leave the shares in the market because that's a way of quote unquote easing the financial system or quote unquote
okay,
keeping the sludge moving. So
gotcha.
when people are out here talking about some they did such a great job with looking at this stock or buying this particular stock, it's
Mm-hmm.
bull crap. All
Okay.
you're doing is you're buying inflated derivatives of a derivative, not even because it's not true stock. It's not the true value of the company. If we just look at financial statements of each company that's on the stock exchange, just like seriously, you look if you ever read financial statements, guys, you can do this for any company you want.
Mm-hmm.
You can do it for Apple. Apple's a great example of this. Okay, Apple's actual profit has not increased, and you would only know that if you actually read their financial statement. What Apple has been doing for the past 3 years, if you read their financial statement, is that they've been buying their own shares back from the market,
Mm-hmm.
which enables it takes away less available in the market, and it actually puts their value up. So therefore, it makes their stock price look bigger. That's how Apple is actually increasing their value, right? So you would only know that by reading the financial statements. And I want you guys to also think about this: when they have these various stock, right, and they'll have stock like millions of shares, right? That's not actual stock; those are derivatives. And a great example of derivative is you. You are a derivative of your parents. Your parents are a derivative of their of your grandparents, who will, if you believe in Adam and Eve, all right, everyone's different, blah blah blah, but which would mean that we're all a derivative or a copy of originals, which is Adam and Eve. Okay, that's an example of a derivative. The other part, and this derivatives, we learned these things in grade school, right? That's what they're using for trading when it comes to the stock market. So what people are buying when they're claiming that they're quote unquote capitalizing on the market, these are set prices by the banks, guys. These are set prices by the banks. And what's so interesting about this is they tell you that. That's the thing that I'm so confused with people who are so gun ho with investing in a mutual fund or investing in whatever. I'm like, they're telling you that they own 60 something million shares. They're telling you that they valued it at X when you read a financial statement, they haven't made a profit. I
Mm-hmm.
mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's literally right there. It's I mean, you just read.
Leland,
And one more thing. Sorry, one more thing.
no, no, please, please, go
Just
ahead, my
just
friend.
just 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 right here, like just not trying to be funny, but Goldman Sachs sold nearly 50 million shares, or 24.8% of Snapchat. Well, where do they sell the shares? To the general market, because they advertised it when it IPO'd at a certain price ticker. And what
Mm-hmm.
people were purchasing were the shares that they themselves released.
Whew. So, what the conclusion that I've come to is the playing field is, I mean, the game is rigged, the playing field is uneven, yet there are there are seams in this overall patchwork of life that will allow individuals to have a meaningful existence, one that allows them to live a good life, one that will allow them the ability to travel if they choose to travel, to drive a vehicle they want to drive, if they want to send their kids to school, fine. If they want to have Chateaubriand, whatever that is, there is enough to go around if if we decide, or no, 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 not if, when we decide that we want something different from life. And I
Absolutely.
say that because I was sitting here jotting down some thoughts and some ideas. And in the first question that I asked myself was, Hank, where are you? And I would have each of you to evaluate based on where you are in life and what you know or what you think you know. Where are you? Are you comfortable with where you are? Is it a good feeling? Are you satisfied, or there's something else? You got a thirst for something else. And if you have a thirst for something else, or if you have fallen behind, but you have now been rejuvenated, energized, and you want to be able to go from point A to point B, hopefully we've given you some information today that says all is not lost, but you need to think differently about getting from where you are to where you want to be. So I think, Leland, the next step would be, we talked about our alternatives, but for people who are looking, who are talking to us, who may know what it is that we do for people, I think it might be time for us to sort of start to think about, okay, if if you if you think if you think you're ready to start to explore possibilities for you, then how might you go about that? And I tell people that I think I saw that you'd put the website up. I would say we help people, and the philosophy that Leland uses is either we do for you or do with you on some of the things that you want to get ahead with. And I say, check us out. But again, in the back of my mind, there's this little thing that keeps saying, Hank, there are people who keep waiting for a better offer. And they've been waiting for 5 or 10 years, and they just think that their train is coming in. Well, I've learned the train has left the track. I don't know whether another train is going to come, or if so, what it's going to look like. But I think, Leland, if I can be emphatic, I think the time is now for people to make a change, because I think in your heart of hearts you know, or if you don't know, other people who be listening to this, they know, and they're saying now, what do I do? And the what you do is based on what do you want to do, okay? Because there are lots of solutions out there, and there are a lot of places you can go. But I think most financial advisors will tell you what you should do, and then they're willing to manage your money.
Mm.
And what we want to do is to help you to generate some revenue and you manage it.
You
Or if you
manage
want to then take it to somebody to manage, that's all fine. But those guys, most of them that I know, will tell you, well, as I said at the onset, hey, $1,500 to $2,000 a month, you put it in this, that, and the other, and you'll get there. Well, there was no way we were going to get to where we wanted to be with $2,000 a month. But that's all we could afford at the time. Okay? So it's not what you can afford, it's what do you want to do? Because as Leland said, you got to start somewhere. Let me change. Let me change this. I'm going to ask a question. It's rhetorical. Say you just drove up to the gas station. You're at the pump. You get out of your car and you look down and you see a penny. Do you pick it up or you walk on by? Now let me tell you about me. I pick it up. Now why do I pick it up? because I didn't have to do anything for that penny but bend down and pick it up. And you go like, man, that's a penny. But I want you to look at things exponentially. How many people are in the world? And if every one of them gave me a penny, okay. So it's called perspective. So I don't drive a big fancy car. I don't live in the biggest house in the neighborhood. I no longer wear Rolex watches and diamond rings. My wife doesn't either. We just because all of those stuff, the fact that I was a corporate exec and my wife was a medical doctor, all of that stuff was we were being show ponies for our acquaintances, and we thought we had to impress people. And somewhere along the line, you remember that book I said I read about leadership and self-deception?
Mm-hmm.
That's when I realized that the only person that I need to impress is me. I really don't care, give a rat about what people think because they're gonna think. They don't really think about me until either I call them or there's a reason. But for the most part, people don't think about you. Just like you don't think about most of the people you know. You even have family members that you don't think about every day. I'm just trying to be as upfront and as rational in thought as I can possibly be. Okay.
I want to say this as well. So what was disclosed to you guys? These are true things. Obviously, you guys saw the truth. You saw the proof for yourself. But I don't want that to be something to where someone becomes discouraged about their future or investing. Period.
That's right.
If you do some more research, even in the articles that we discussed, you'll notice that alongside Goldman Sachs, alongside Deutsche Bank, there are still other people just like you who also invested in Snapchat pre-IPO. Now, with the current laws, in order for someone to do that, you have to be what's considered an accredited investor. Here's the caveat. The likelihood that you can become an accredited investor by simply giving your money to a financial advisor or planner is not likely. It's not likely. The likelihood that you'll become an accredited investor by going the traditional route of investing is highly not likely. All right. The methods that we use, asset builder blocks and revenue routes, when it comes to acquiring your assets, it's a lot easier that way. All right. And so anyone who's kind of wondering like what's an accredited investor, I'll let you guys Google it. But I'll tell you this. If you're thinking that you're going to become an accredited investor through your 401k, through the traditional routes or the mutual funds, it's not likely. It's not likely. So with that being said, follow the link, go to salary to the number 2 freedom.com. That's salary, the number 2 freedom.com. Salary to freedom.com. And we will catch you guys.
Thank you, everybody. We enjoyed your participation. What we're trying to do, I believe, is we're going to start to put a picture. It's a piece of silver that has tarnished, or it's a big brass vase that has has tarnished. And what we're going to try to do is to help you to realize slowly we're going to get that glistening shine back on it, get you motivated to know that it's not the end, that you don't have to look at this craziness and think it's worthless. We're going to make it shine for you if you let us. If you're willing to say, I'm now ready, will you help me? Can you help me? And you'll be surprised as to how successful you can be by letting someone else help you. Leland, in fact, yes, the other time we talked about the whole idea of a team. Because for most
It's
people,
needed.
we've been doing stuff by ourselves with our own limited know-how, or we've been talking to our buddies or our, and here's the deal. Whomever you're getting your information from, short of today, before today, look at his or her car, his or her house, take a look at what he or she is doing. And if that's the life that you want to live, then keep on listening to them. You know, and you say, what is he talking about? You know exactly what I'm talking about. John Maxwell says that you show me your friends, I can tell you about yourself. And he goes on to say that we are the sum total of five people, our closest friends. And I also know my mom and dad used to tell me birds of a feather flock together. You do what your friends do. They move, you move. They buy a new car, you buy a new car. The dudes buy a new suit, you go out and buy a new suit. They buy a nice Stetson hat, you buy a nice Stetson hat. I hope you understand what I'm getting at.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
All right.
And real quick for everyone else, you don't have to be a accredited investor to be an accredited investor. All right. So in other words, so I think because sometimes people are like, well, I want to do that, but I'm not that, so I can't do that. That's it's something that you build towards. When an actor or actress wants to get in shape for a new role, right? A new role, they're not that role yet, but they hire a trainer. That trainer helps them get to that level, and now they're able to perform, whether as an actor or even as an athlete, right? The great thing about the program, as Hank mentioned, we can do it to where we can do 95% of the work for you, or we can do it to where we're coaching you and we're meeting with you on a regular basis, right? It really depends on, do you want it done for you or do you want us to do it with you, right? And of course, the differential, and a lot of people are thinking like, what's the difference? Well, one of the big differences is that there is a larger time commitment in one, and there's a larger investment as far as monetary investment in the other. But regardless of whichever is best for you, we're still willing to help, but we have to learn more about your situation and really about what building blocks will work first or work better for your situation. And one of the best ways for us to do that is when you go to the link salary2freedom.com, that's salary, the number 2, freedom.com, you enter in your email address, it takes you to a quick presentation that explains more of what Hank and I have went through in depth, but also in a much shorter format, right? So where it's a lot shorter, 30 minutes or so. And then it's going to take you to a survey. Well, that survey helps us understand how we can best serve you, because ultimately we want you to be successful. A large part of our business model is we're not successful unless you're successful. So it has to be a win-win situation. That's what makes it a team. A lot of times when people are investing with a mutual fund or a stockbroker or a financial advisor or a financial planner, that person, he or she, they're obtaining money regardless of the performance. And God forbid, if you had a nice game, they're definitely going to take their cut before you even see the gains. Once you're able to have these correct asset building blocks and these revenue routes working in a system, that revenue is yours. That passive income is yours. We don't take that money, but we take joy and pride in knowing that we were able to help yet another client, yet another individual go from salary to freedom. So with that being said, go to salary2freedom.com. That's salary, the number 2, freedom.com, and schedule time with us. We also have tons of bonuses for you as well. And we actually have about 4 different bonuses when someone fills that questionnaire out. So Looking forward to talking to you guys, and we'll see you all on the next one as well.
Hey, thank you so much for your participation today. Thank you, Leland.